All right. Awesome. Looks like we're live. Excellent. Let me just double check my audio's good. All right. Okay, I think that's better. All right, guys. Welcome. My name is Gabriel Quinn. I am an illustrator and a concept artist. Most recently, I've done some cards for Lorcana, but yeah, I'm working on a lot of cool world building projects right now, and I like to stream my progress on those projects and also do some free educational content here on YouTube, which is kind of what I'm going to be doing today, which is pretty cool. Just as a preface, if you like what I do, don't forget to, I guess, do all the stuff like the video and comment and everything. If you want to catch these streams live, you can subscribe and turn on notifications, all that good stuff. And it's actually a funny segue because we're going to be talking about an activity we do in my Discord space, which is really an exciting part of this community. I talk about it every time I stream. It's a really cool community. And today I'm going to show you. So what we did was just going to pull this over here. Yeah, what we did was we did a 1 hour character design challenge in the Discord space. So I'm going to pull up the Discord space here so you guys can see what it looks like. If I go over, yeah, okay, you guys can see. So yeah, this is the Discord space that we have. It's really fun. Obviously, we've got a bunch of really cool members. And I'm just super grateful for the community. It's super fun. And oftentimes we'll do a character design challenge that lasts only 1 hour. So the 1 hour character design challenge is kind of a staple of the server. We've been doing it ever since we started. Sometimes we'll do like 4 in a week. Sometimes, a little time will go by between them. Usually it depends on my schedule and what's possible, but oftentimes community members will lead their own. So you can see that I'm scrolling through a channel here, and this is the challenge post where we post all of the challenge results. So we'll usually do things live. You can see Marco and Patricia here are hanging out after the challenge that we just did. So we just did the 1 hour challenge, and then immediately I'm going live now right after. So we did the challenge, and oh yeah, wait, I don't even need my headphones because, yeah, anyway, I'm not in a call anymore. Why would I need headphones? So as you can see, everyone posted their results here of what they were able to do during the 1 hour. So we always have a prompt or something that we follow whenever we do the challenge. So for this week, oftentimes we'll do kind of like a random set of images. What's fun is that we'll oftentimes collaborate and like add a few references. So like I added this one, Jay added this one, Marco did this one, Calvin did this one, and we'll all work together. But this week I wanted to curate specifically some images that I liked. So the 3 images we used as an inspiration for this 1 hour challenge was, oh, I'm getting a notification. Someone's telling me the audio's low. Let me just fix that really quick. Okay, that should fix it. And I hope that there's no static in the background. You guys will let me know though. So, okay. So we're looking at this image. It's a fish hammer, obviously. And then I wanted to do, strangely enough, 2 hammers. So we have 2 hammers here. And this one has a green man on it. And I thought that was so cool. And for those of you guys who don't know, the green man is a really interesting and fun, I'll pull it up here. Green man. I want to pull up the green man images because it's such a cool ancient symbol of like rebirth and the cycle of life and all of that stuff. So yeah, I'll pull over a little quick Google image search here, so you guys can see. Just want to make sure. Yeah. So oftentimes you'll see the green man being used to represent like in the kind of architecture where we have like a green man on a little building here, and you'll see a lot of these in the world, like a lot of these kind of green men, I guess, who are gilding all of these pieces of architecture. And it's, as a symbol, it's really strong. So yeah, it's a cool symbol, very kind of fairy-like and strange. So I thought a hammer that had the green man was like a really cool symbol, which was nice. Also, oh yeah, also I'm just welcoming Nabs and Starlight to the chat, and also Professor Buck, who participated in this challenge, which is cool. But yeah, so let's talk about some of the results. Oh yeah, and the last one was this like fish egg cluster, and I thought this was really cool because it's like texturally it's interesting. It's kind of wet and weird, and they're squishy and fragile, and there's creatures in there, and I thought it was really cool that you could see the creatures. So. Oh, Marco updated his design. That's cheating, unfortunately, which is just kind of, I'm just joking primarily on that front. So let's see what the results were of this challenge. So we all had 1 hour to do the challenge. So we have Marco's piece here, which is a great sketch. We can see he's got some interesting kind of almost like armor-esque elements, these kind of like knee plates and strange gildings, and he's got this hammer, obviously. My result here, which was... I'll show you guys how I got to this result. It's a very strange premise, but it's something that I want to continue to develop. I think Buck's outcome was really strong, using all components, really. So we've got like the kind of green man mixed with this kind of fish man face. And then he's got strapped to his back a bunch of fish eggs, which is almost like, it reminds me of those frogs, or like the little babies like live on their back. And then he's got this big old hammer with this kind of Aztec inspired fish thing. So this is a really coherent outcome, which I think is awesome. And then Seth's piece here, which is fantastic, thinking about like potential and future and power. So he developed this kind of godlike sketch character here. And then we have Mojo's outcome, where he joined a little bit late and he did this cool kind of creaturey painting thing. And then Marco here is updated with some colors, which is kind of funny. But it makes certain things a lot clearer, actually. So color's a powerful tool. So let's talk about first kind of how we got here. So when I take you through the process of like analysis and all of that stuff, what's important to remember for these kind of challenges is that like 1 hour is not a lot of time at all. It's not a lot of time at all. So how can you make a character in 1 hour? What does that look like? Well, you know, we're working off of some image-based references, which makes things a lot more straightforward because you have some kind of required subject matter. So we've got like this kind of very strong hammer motif, this kind of gilded related to what you're doing motif, and this kind of symbol of the green man and the fish egg. So we've got some elements there. And here we have my kind of breakdown and analysis. So I spent the first, I want to say 10-ish minutes, I suppose, of the 1 hour. Because again, you got to remember, an hour is not a lot of time at all. Like if you actually track how much an hour is, you know, it's like you're thinking about 60 minutes here. If you're using 10 minutes to prep, that's like a good chunk of your time. So the first chunk of my time was kind of spent sort of going like, okay, like what do I have here? And when we pick a very strange and difficult premise like this, it kind of makes it really fun and interesting, and it makes you kind of scratch your head. So I started exploring these different elements. And if you guys have seen my using reference to create better design video where I go over another kind of challenge result, I also did a 1 hour challenge to make that kind of like eagle huntsman style thing. It's my most viewed stream, so if you just look, and you can find it pretty easily, but it was a similar process of breaking down your references. So over here we kind of have the egg, where we kind of have like a lot of eggs. They're wet, they're translucent. Those are kind of like objective, very visual things to note down there. And we also have translucency. I already said translucency. We also have the idea of new life. So that's like a metaphorical idea. And then squishy, which is like a characteristic, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then the hammer is this kind of destructive and driving force. And that was kind of my first note for the hammer of like, what is this? What is it for? All that good stuff. And then I also wanted to pay attention to the idea of like the fish, essentially like schools of fish. And that kind of comes into play a little bit as we continue on. We also have the green man, which I kind of added in just because I loved how this hammer looked. And oftentimes I like impulsively include reference for these challenges because I don't want to think about it too much. I want my thinking to happen in the moment. So I'll just kind of choose images that draw me to the information, and we'll just kind of go with that pretty much. And then I thought of this idea of creation because a hammer is oftentimes used like in a forge. and then the creation of life through like the kind of eggs. And with a forge, there's this kind of metaphor of fire, and then there's also this kind of this inversion of elements of like fire and water and life and all this stuff. So I was thinking about all that stuff. So as I was figuring that out, ideas started to come to my mind. Like the blacksmith came up as like a really obvious example, and I was like, all right, okay, cool. So like blacksmith, obvious example, guy with a hammer, that makes sense. Let's try it out. So I started scribbling it out, and I think it's good to just let yourself explore an impulsive idea and just kind of see what happens. And in my case, like I wanted to get it out of my system because I sort of had a bias that I wanted to do something different. I wanted to challenge myself more and get to a more strange place. So I got to this kind of scribble, and the idea was, and you kind of can't see it in the scribble because it's so scribbly, but the idea was this forge master, right, who's here at the forge, he like eats and consumes these eggs, and maybe they're dragon eggs or something. He consumes these eggs, and when he consumes them, it allows him to like get this burning fire magic that allows him to like forge these legendary items or like use the dragon fire to forge things. So he bites down on the egg, and these flames erupt out of his face, like that kind of cool imagery. And I was like, oh, that'd be so cool. But I didn't feel like that would be more of like a technical execution of like drawing. And the idea is cool, but again, I wanted to push myself just a little bit more. So I removed all references that I had, and I started thinking about some other ideas. And one thing that came to mind, and you can see how quickly I abandoned this idea, but it's funny because for me, the idea is so clear when I look at the scribble. But I was thinking about a character who, used the ocean and the tides, you know what I mean, kind of like as their hammer. So they like summon the waves, as it were. And the waves kind of crash over like as their hammer. But I couldn't really think about how the eggs were involved. I couldn't really think about, other elements there that were kind of sort of something that I really wanted to explore. So I quickly moved on from this idea because I knew there wasn't really much to explore. So then we get to this kind of sketch. And this is obviously where you can see I'm investing a lot more time, a lot more effort into how I'm drawing and what I'm drawing. So the first kind of notation that comes to mind for me with this one in particular is like, I kind of focused on the green man metaphor for a minute. And I focused on this idea of like, what if there was this creature or this being that kind of used the eggs, like maybe like the calcified or like, long forgotten ancient eggs of like a primordial beast. And upon cracking the egg, like a forest just like explodes out of that spot. Like, so it's kind of like an instant forest, but the egg is so powerful and so like, I think like, it's like so hard to crack open. So like that's the whole thing, is like this character is able to crack open this egg, and this forest appears. And as I was sketching out the egg on the stump, as kind of like this is where they'll make the strike on this kind of dead stump, I was thinking about, I kept drawing this kind of gruff guy over and over and over, and I was like, man, I'm not liking this as much. Like I kind of, again, want to try something different. And I think that, any of the ideas that I've come up with could have worked, but I think I had a stubbornness today in me where I wanted to just get to something different or something strange. Like I wanted to find something in obscurity that wasn't like an instant reaction that I had. And so I started drawing this very soft kind of female character who had this long staff. And at the end, I was trying out these different ideas of like, maybe there's a rock on the end where roots have grown over, and maybe she's kind of like a reaper character, so there's a scythe element. And then I started to draw these green men almost like her accolades, right? Like almost like her sort of followers or something. And then that kind of exploded out into this next kind of iteration where I was exploring, this kind of idea of like, all right, we've kind of got this nature matron character, and I've brought some color in, and I started to run out of time, so I didn't really get to finish anything here. Because again, you only have an hour, and the struggle with working in such a tight time frame is that I think that, once again, this happens to me quite a bit. Once again, my idea ended up outpacing my time limit, right? Because I've talked a lot about in my kind of other content I've put out here on world building, I've talked about this idea of found world building, where you're kind of finding it as you're going. And so I was really finding it as I was going and enjoying it. But then, of course, the timer went off and we all had to do pencils down. So that was kind of a struggle. But I ended up, having this kind of result that I thought was interesting. The only thing I feel about this is the only thing I'm feeling. Oh, I am out of focus. Wait, let me fix that. Hello. Oh. Oops. Here we go. There we go. Thanks for mentioning that, Buck. Yeah, my only kind of regret with this piece really is that like certain things didn't come together. Like I was starting to get there, like I was actually really starting to get there, but it was sort of, I ended up having to sort of bring it home and do something. So you'll notice from my sketch, like, I do kind of have a leafy thing there, but really when I was imagining this character, this female character, I actually wasn't imagining the green. The green kind of came out of a last minute necessity of like, this has got to get done. I got to finish this. I have 5 minutes left. I have to paint this out. So I did all the coloring in about 5 minutes. So it's clear that it's not super strong here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the some of the work of people who actually did the challenge in my server, and I'm going to kind of talk about it and, maybe how they could improve things. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about my own design and what I want to do to improve it and expand and maybe even, finish this idea. So that's what we're going to be talking about. I've done a live 1 hour design on stream before, but today I thought it would be fun just to kind of talk about the design, because that's kind of a cool, fun thing to do. In the kind of last minutes, I started thinking like, I'll paint out the egg and how like this ancient primordial dragon creature is in the egg and it's kind of long calcified. So it's sort of like a second life from something that couldn't come into life, and then I was going to do a kind of call out of the forest just exploding out from that spot and kind of what that would look like if I painted that out or illustrated that out. So I didn't get to that stuff, which was such a big part of the idea. I think that if I actually want to finish this, what I'll have to do is do the egg cracking in the moment. Like it's got to be in the moment. There's this great illustration for, I think, let me see if I can find it. I think I can find it here. If I do a quick Google search. Yeah, here we go. There's this great Magic the Gathering card. And I'll pull it up here for you. But I just love the energy of the art. Let's see if I can find anything remotely high res. Yeah, this works. So I'll bring this in. Like this kind of boom, like there's this explosion of vines coming out. This is a really, really great illustration done by Ron Spears, as you can see here. And the gameplay is kind of like, oh, you get a green guy that's able to block an enemy, and it's kind of like, surprise, I made a plant. The plant's probably going to die in the combat or whatever, but it's kind of like a cool surprise thing. And I just love the imagery and the flavor, but this kind of like light bursting with this amber and green, like that's really kind of where my head's at with the piece. And there's also another one, which I think is really good. Apologies if you hear the sounds of sirens outside. It's just New York City, baby. Let's go. But again, there's another really great older card that doesn't see as much play these days, but again, the art is so beautiful. This one for Explosive Vegetation by John Avon, and again, it's just that kind of like bam, like life is exploding out from a single point. I think it's just so cool. So that's kind of like the energy I want to bring to this design, but we couldn't really get there in the moment, unfortunately. But yeah, let's talk about the participants of this challenge, because what I really appreciate. Oh, this is great. Patricia did an outcome. That's so wonderful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these over and, oh, that was weird. There we go. I'm going to copy these over and I'm going to talk a little bit about each piece. Not a whole lot. I'm not going to do like a full critique, but I'm going to talk about, what could potentially be added to increase the strength of the image. And just like a little kind of reference point for people. So, well, got a high-res one from Seth. Nice. And if you guys are curious, I asked them to add their little handle here if you guys want to check out their work. So you guys can pause the video and check that out. I don't think everyone participated in that, but some people did. Oh, there's Marco's here. So let's talk about these different pieces. Let's start with Marco's, since he was the first to submit. So I think that when we were talking in the Discord and we were kind of doing this challenge, he was communicating to me that what he wanted out of this design was this kind of, divine, sort of like godlike character that kind of walks through the world and is this kind of like nature god who dreams up this new utopian world. And I think that oftentimes we can sort of get stuck in what we're used to drawing. So for this one, I think like you can have this kind of premise of like the kind of lofty idea that you have in your head. So we can kind of mark out the idea as its own thing. And then we can kind of see kind of like what are our limitations? Like, are we actually able to like execute and have an outcome that reflects that work? So having known Marco for a while and him being a part of the community and seeing a lot of his work, it kind of gives me an advantage in terms of like helping him or talking about this piece with a bit more insight. So I think that we've kind of got this belt going around and these kind of knee plates and this kind of style of pants. And I think that this is kind of indicative of a lot of what I've seen Marco explore in terms of ideas and costuming. We've got kind of a tattered tank top and all that stuff. And there was this element of wanting to kind of have this element of normalcy of like he's just kind of an everyday guy and you might mistake him for being this godlike being, but it's like revealed eventually. I think the green kind of takes away from that, so maybe there was kind of an abandonment of that motif in the coloring phase. But we've got this kind of hammer machine here, and we've got this ambiguous machine on the back, which I'm assuming is related to this kind of dream-like theme here. So kind of an interesting common want when we're designing is kind of you have a character, and we're all guilty of this. I'm guilty of this as well. You have a character and they've got their legs, they've got their arms, you know what I mean, in their body, and here they are in the world, and they want to do something. So what we do is we kind of say like, okay, well, I'll put it on their back, and there's this kind of element of I'm just going to put it on their back. So the classic one of this is a giant scroll. Like putting a giant scroll on the back, that's like a classic, like I'll put it on their back or whatever, you know what I mean? You have like a jetpack or you have a giant sword on the back, or putting things on a character's back is very symbolic and metaphorical. And this is kind of no different. We've kind of got this sort of dream machine thing on the back here, and we've got his tool of using the dream machine in the foreground here. I think that if we wanted to push this a little bit more, I think that the theme of having kind of like a godlike being, I would assume that the machine he would use would be super foreign in terms of like our comprehension of what it is. And it would be kind of related to that divinity. And since it's kind of a nature-inspired kind of god character, deity character, kind of what's stopping you from having a bit more of an abstract approach to this? You could just as easily have a cool kind of like wraparound organic design for the technology, and maybe some spiral motifs going in and all of that stuff because of the cyclical nature of just this nature, and also the cyclical nature of the Green Man inspiration for this. Like, I think you could have maybe pushed that a little bit more or thought about that a little bit more. And what I'm trying to do is give feedback that also would have been achievable in the hour, because again, like a 1 hour design is super challenging. So you can't critique things as if they're like a finished concept. You have to keep that stuff in mind. And with the hammer as well, I would kind of do a similar thing of like, what kind of magical tool is this? How does it relate to what they do? And how can you borrow and use shapes in a powerful way that could bring forth this change? I think as well in the face, And this is just going to happen as you improve with art. Having the understanding of how to do a more like godlike being will kind of help. You've kind of already got a head start with the eyes that are have no pupils. Like that's a very godlike thing to have the glowing eyes. But one thing I would try to explore is within that you can kind of have a bit more glow to the eyes. Number one, that could help your case too with a kind of divinity. But also there's kind of a nonchalantness or focus that a godlike character would have. So the kind of raised eyebrows here feel maybe a little bit out of place. So we can think about having a much more, purposeful and contemplative, expression here on the face. Maybe a little more focus, a little more intensity. But I like the posture, how the posture is very upright, and that it feels very noble and whatnot. But those are the things I would consider if I were to return to this piece and try to continue pushing it. I think the clothing works. But again, like if you're going for the kind of normal guy, like being mistaken for a god thing, like I think lean into that more and kind of maybe ditch all the technology. And if you're leaning into there's just a kind of walking divine presence who's changing the world, I think just do that as well. Like have that strangeness of the divine kind of echo in there throughout. So that's what I would say about that. In terms of finish, I think this is, again, like for an hour, you've blocked in your values. If you kind of do a little look, things are clear. So I think this is a great result for an hour. This is an idea you could continue to refine and explore for sure. Next, let's do Seth's next. So yeah, Seth's piece I really like. I think that the drawing is strong. So we've got kind of like this tall being. We're using the kind of dark, heavy shadows to communicate like what is being kind of like recessed in space and all of that stuff. With this one, I think that the outcome is really strong and clear. But there's elements of the kind of how you drew it that I think could be improved on. One thing I already talked about just in the server when we were finished was kind of this idea of like you have this upward motion towards the face that I think is really nice. Kind of everything is leading you up. But then there's this kind of, I think, closed off element to the costume where things are kind of stopping at this buckle. And this is kind of like a shape design energy thing, but it feels like there's like an ending here, and it doesn't necessarily support the overall composition. So just making a few small changes to this design, I'll just copy it over and work on top. I think like if we had, for instance, a more traditional kind of cloak design, something kind of like this, where then we could explore a little bit more like framing of the face. And you could kind of do whatever you want. You could even do an idea of like he's got the kind of gilded golden thing around his neck. Like that also adds a really cool element to it. And we don't have to stop with this kind of arcing motion. We could still do that. But even this, like having these elements like trail up towards the face just adds so much more energy to this design. The other thing I mentioned is it's skewing a little to the left, putting the character off kilter. And if you want like a divine being, having that strong centered symmetry, it just adds so much like power to the character. So kind of choosing to go a little bit more symmetrical and upright here, just by tilting it a little bit, like helps a lot. And then the other thing is that you also have an opportunity to do almost like a hand of benediction thing, which is kind of like a very religious symbol of like this kind of generous outstretched kind of hand holding the world and doing this symbol thing. I don't remember what it is exactly. But there's an opportunity to kind of push the gesture a little bit more and have the hand potentially like a little bit higher on the staff here. And this hand that's kind of going down, holding the magic down. There's an element you could really focus in on there, which is kind of like you could do that like controlling the thing or like drawing up power from the earth. Like you can kind of have that element. Or you could, again, do more of the powerful godlike thing of having the hand holding the power. He's like holding the power of the world. You know what I mean? And then you can relate that to his magic staff on the other side. Like you could have some kind of harmony, like maybe the circles kind of go behind him and go around to like where the staff is, and maybe there's like a magical relationship, and you can have like a sub framing of the face within this composition, and that'll add just a lot of really nice juice to this image, I think. And again, these are all things that if they're kind of locked in your brain, you can achieve this kind of sketching and these themes within the hour as well. Yeah, I think that when it comes to robes and whatnot going down, I think don't be afraid to just have that gravity pulling things down in a straight manner a lot of the time. Like even over here, just like having that kind of straight down look it really kind of emphasizes the gravity, and that's what makes a lot of folds feel real, is when you really feel that gravity of the force of gravity pulling things down. So yeah, just changing a few elements here, nothing too crazy, I think help, and even having that long like off the sleeve shadow coming down. Maybe this one's going in front, but this one's kind of coming down like that. Again, it just adds such a strong framing there, a lot of nice graphic shapes. And then whenever you do a little creature, if it has an eye, it adds like a cuteness to it, which is fine if it's your intention, but just by removing that eye, or even doing instead like a smaller or like a sleepy eye, it's a bit more symbolic and a bit less it draws less focus. But yeah, so that's some cool stuff you could try, but I think the outcome is pretty sick. I like the idea that this dragon thing is curled around this staff. And yeah, I could definitely like push that and add that in as like kind of other motifs in other areas too. But yeah, I think this is a strong result, and that's just one way to push this. If we put them side by side, you can kind of see what I mean in terms of like one feeling a little more like off kilter and less kind of magnificent, and this one kind of having a lot more of that power and like grounded centeredness, you know? So gesture, just little minute changes can affect how we see a character. So yeah, that's a good thing to think about too. Let's look at, let's do this one. Let's do Bucks next. I love this outcome. I think this is really cool. I don't have a lot to say about this. We've also got the kind of traditional sort of like put it on their back approach, which again, like you can't discount the put it on your back approach. It's a really strong approach. So I really like how this is just so clear about what's going on. It's like this character, he's carrying the eggs, and he's got his big hammer to protect them or as some kind of tool on his journey. The expression of it's kind of like looking at us in this kind of like, who are you kind of way, adds a sense of playfulness, which I like about the character. But I think this result is really strong. And I think that it's just really clear and excellent. Like in terms of pushing this to the next level, I think like, of course, seeing the full figure would help. But I think that like, again, taking things to the next level in terms of like, you know, the kind of netting on the back and sort of the attachment points, like, could be thinking a little bit more about that. Like maybe it's in the net, but then there's also some kind of like secondary thing holding them in, which would allow it to actually like have structure. And it also adds kind of a personal sense of design. If you like to design, you can add more of the kind of like Aztec spirals onto the back as well. If you'd want to at this level or at this stage, you can add that kind of inlay and whatnot. And then for something this big to be on the body, like the straps would probably need to be a bit more robust. So you could do classic backpack straps if you wanted to, or you could just kind of thicken this strap and maybe even have another one going across in the other direction. That would help a lot, I think, in terms of making it feel like he's really carrying these eggs, and it's like maybe it's in and they're heavy. And you'd also maybe want to tilt the body like a little bit more forward, and then have the hammer go back to its original position in terms of being the thing that's grounding us and like what is kind of upright. Something like that. Like that would kind of communicate that the eggs are maybe a little bit heavier than how they're being portrayed now. So I think like maybe there's some minute things in the gesture, but again, that's kind of a nitpick. I think this is really strong. Not much to say about this one. But yeah, great job, Buck. This is sick. I think Mojo's is so loose And it's kind of clear what's going on here. There's a creature, its fins are under the water, and its body's being exposed here, and there's like a translucency and some eggs. Like, I think the only solution to this one, or the kind of fix, is just to keep painting. I think this kind of outcome is really hard to achieve in a short amount of time. The only thing I would say is that, like, if you, because I know you kind of use the lasso tool for this piece, I know if you really, kind of gave it the time and kind of really spent time with the body shape, and kind of had the thing, there is a way to kind of get the outcome you're looking for in terms of something kind of clean. Like, if you have this shape, you can, let me show this on another layer. You can have that next kind of step. Like, you can just select out this area that you did and just pick like a slightly darker tone, and you can work. I think your process can be streamlined a bit, so you're working with bigger shapes sooner, so that you're able to get a bit more clarity in what you're doing. Because like I see what you're doing, like I understand it, but I think like when you then introduce a lot of these little brush work things, it's getting in the way of the clarity of like what I know you're trying to create. So I think working with big shapes and letting them be simple, it might really help you. And knowing when to put those little details in, and like kind of how to work in that way. So I think just your overall process is going to make things like faster and more streamlined for you. But I like the painting. I think this is really fun for an hour. It's great. And lastly, I think that this one that Patricia did, like very last minute, she joined last minute. I think this is a really fun piece. I love that there's kind of like a light source being emitted from the eggs, and there's this kind of charming gesture, and she's kind of holding the eggs here, and there's a sense of joy and kind of glowingness. So very much focusing on the foresty, nymphy thing, and I know this is related to another character she designed, so it's just kind of like a fun piece. So thanks for participating, Patricia. This is great. In terms of improving this, I think that you noted down a lot of clear information in terms of light and shape. There's a couple things that I think you could strengthen, I think. But again, I know this is like a quick thing for you, but even in kind of the feet, knowing kind of how to block in strong shapes for some feet. Like, we all know Claire Wendling's art and how expressive she is in all the limbs of the bodies. Like, if you improve your knowledge of that kind of area of anatomy, you can have a lot of charm in those areas. And you can even kind of like block this out as if it's like in shadow and show like the pads of the feet if you wanted to. But I love the simple take and the fun. I don't really see the hammer in here at all, which is totally fine. Like, I know you just did this for fun. So thanks for participating, Patricia. I really appreciate it. And yeah, it's just cool. It's just a really cool piece. And I love the tones. They're really great tones. So good job. Okay, so yeah, that's it for the participants for this week's challenge. There's a lot of cool stuff that can come out of these challenges. Today was really short notice, so I'm amazed we had like as many people participate as we did. And yeah, if you want to join these challenges, live and kind of hang out with all of us and get to know everyone, you can do so through the Patreon in the description. It'll give you access to the Discord server. You can join, and we do these challenges. This was a fun one from last week. I was really happy with how these drawings turned out. This is a really great one. So yeah, and you can see like we do these a lot, and there's a lot of outcomes, and this was a fun one too. I remember this one was really good fun. So yeah, I would highly recommend joining, and it's a really supportive community, and we do a lot of cool stuff, and yeah, and you can even just see kind of what we do. So yeah, that's my pitch for that. Now let's talk about my piece, which again, like, especially after seeing how clear some of these outcomes were, like, it's cool to kind of come back to mine and kind of be like, damn, like there's a lot of ambiguity here that I want to make more clear. I also have to do a quick time check since I don't have unlimited time today. Oh gosh. Am I even able to do this? I think I don't know if I have time to actually explore this fully. Let's do a little bit and then we'll call it, because going through everyone's work was really fun and it took some time. So I went deeper than I thought. But let me look at the chat actually. Let me see who's here. Oh, Michael's here. Seth is here. Oh, great. Awesome. Grim is here. We got Verico. Heck yeah. We got... Someone asked... Margina Tautkus asked, I don't know if this is your strong suit, but I was wondering if you have any tips on beginning a story without being cliche and a good intro to a character's personality. I've hit a wall. I've also got Bane saying good night. Good night, dude. Buck said, I never gotten a critique before, so this was all so surreal. I'm definitely going to keep working on my character with your notes in mind. Heck yeah, dude. CJ says, what's good? Sadly can't stick around. Aw, thanks for dropping in. Awesome. Thanks, Patricia. Yeah, I can give you some tips on that, on not being cliche with a story. I think that there are certain stories that are just kind of true, and I think that true stories are never going to be cliche. They're never going to feel cliche. Like, for instance, if you watch like Avatar, like the Blue People one, like that story doesn't really feel cliche. Because it's just Pocahontas, and Pocahontas is just like, dancing with wolves or whatever. Like it's all this archetype of story of kind of like learning what's really important in life through exposure to like some kind of, foreign way of living. And like, that's kind of a true story, that people need. It's like an important story for people to learn. So, like those kind of stories are never going to feel cliche. I think cliche comes up most when you're trying to not be cliche. And like, it's funny how I was just talking about this with everyone in the challenge, how oftentimes someone's like first idea when they're trying to be original is like the most unoriginal idea. Like, someone creating a story is oftentimes like, I've got a really dark and gritty character, and the world is actually really dark and gritty and twisted. It's like, all right, dude, fair enough. That's cool. Like, yeah, like nice story, I guess, or people end up trying to do like too much, or, and sometimes you do get something that is a little cliche, like, orphaned character goes on an adventure. It's like, that's such a classic. Which again has its kind of pros and cons, I suppose. But I think that rather than trying not to be cliche, the real answer is to kind of do what's honest to you, which means you're kind of at the mercy of how honest you are with yourself and how much you understand about life in the world. So I say this a lot, but to be an extraordinary artist, you really should seek to be an extraordinary person. Oftentimes, artists' like limits are like themselves, their outlook on life, and they can get incredible execution, but at the end of the day, there is just some kind of limitation there in terms of like what they're able to express or what they care about. And you see this a lot with very popular forms of media. Like, we might really love the work of a particular creative person, but at the end of the day, like, they really are at the limit of their own capacity. And I've had some experiences where I've kind of realized, like, wait a minute, like, this isn't good for the world, and this artist has not learned enough about life in order to be responsible with their skills. Like, that comes up a lot for me, at least. And that stuff I talk about a lot in my, personal courses that I do and everything. But yeah, so I think that in trying to not be cliche, you can oftentimes end up being the most cliche. An intro to character, I mean, it depends on what you're doing. Is this like a comic or a movie or whatever? Like, there's all these different ways of introducing a character that are related to a medium in particular, or an art form. I think that one thing you can think about with any of those examples is that you want to know what they do and how they do those things. So it's like, if they're skateboarding, are they like super confident and have a lot of bravado? And are they, like taking risks and doing things out of turn, but maybe they have to go out of their way to avoid the little old lady crossing the street, and they end up hurting themselves, but it's rather they hurt themselves than hurt the little old lady. So now you know that they take risks, but they are a nice person deep down. So that's one example where you could sort of introduce through action and an example where the audience can set up appropriate expectations for the character. Like oftentimes with story, you want your audience to have appropriate expectations, because if your audience is confused about what your characters are going to do, they're not really going to care about what they do, really. Because a character can do a really dark thing, but if you're not like, I don't know, if you don't have appropriate expectations about that character, it's not going to have that impact, you know, because the character turning evil, you only really care about it if you see how they are. And I think there's a lot of examples we can look to in recent media that we can see like really bad introduction and really bad expectations. Like the new Star Wars movies, like your expectations are all over the place. You have no idea what the characters want or are supposed to do. And it makes all of the reveals and the switches and everything just so meaningless. Like I didn't care about Kylo or Rey at all. I didn't care about them at all. I didn't care what they did. I didn't care what happened. There was like no sense of that. So like, yeah, I think that setting up appropriate audience expectations is the most important thing you can do as a storyteller. And then what you do with those characters is what matters next. But it's like, yeah, because you can subvert those expectations, or you can really just use them for story, which is like what good story is. But yeah, so I think like figuring out how to use action is and like moments of action is really important. And when you have two characters doing something together, again, that's an opportunity for you to tell the audience and describe through evidence like how these people move throughout the world, what they're trying to do in the world, and like how they're trying to achieve what they're trying to do. You know, it's very, it seems like it's very basic stuff, but it's easy to forget, and we try to overcomplicate things a lot, I think. I think a lot of storytelling is much more like logic based than we think it is, but that's just my opinion. Actually, so, you know, I loved kind of going over this design, and I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a couple notations about this that I want to be really clear. Like, I think I want to change this staff, and I think I want to change the character overall, because I mentioned that green wasn't actually kind of what I wanted to go for this character. I think what I actually wanted to go for is something a lot more spooky and interesting, like a much more of like a gray kind of, like a grayish purplish kind of white cloak. And I want this character to feel much more like ambiguous and kind of confusing, maybe. So something a little bit more like this. So I'll make a few notations about what I want to do with this design, and probably next time I stream I'll show the finished outcome of this, and I won't call it making a design in 1 hour. I'll call it how to finish the design that you made, or how to fix the design you make in 1 hour. Yeah, so I'll make a few notations about what I want to do with this design, and then we'll call it for the stream. But I'll do a little sneak peek of something I'm working on, so that I can, because it's related to that question that was just asked. Yeah, no problem for the tips. Absolutely no problem. And I think that one thing you can do as well is to develop your skills of analysis and understanding. Is you can, when you're consuming media, you can, from a very logical point of view, go through what they're telling you about the character. And like really write it down and make sure that you understand what they're doing, because that's really going to help with your skills and your capacity to develop your story, is your ability to analyze and understand. So would highly recommend having that approach. Yeah, something like this feels so right. It's just really nice, you know, hood shape and all of that stuff, like almost like a dark, kind of like a moon character. And I think what I actually want for the handle is something like a dark, like almost like a really spooky metallic. Like I want her to feel confusing, like you don't know who she is, but she's the friends of these green things. So I want the green guys to actually be like a contrast to her. Like she loves them, but she's very different to them. I think that's what I want to do for this design. Which means I think I want to do something a lot more designed. So not focusing on a wood material here, but doing a much more metallic material. Heck yeah. Let's do that. But yeah, design is really fun. I've been having a lot of fun with design recently. I'll show you guys a couple things that I've been sketching and painting because I've been preparing to do a new course for March, and that should be available on Monday to purchase seats for. I haven't made the seats available yet, but yeah, if you wanted a seat in the next class that I'm doing, those will be live on Monday. But yeah, I think like the tool should feel weird, like a cool, strange, like a otherworldly tool, you know? And we can kind of say a bit about like the edges of this tool by using like a subtle implication of light, like just kind of something like this just really quickly tells us that this is like a faceted object with different facets and sides. I think it's a little too strange though, that depiction, but something like that where we have like a weird pointy thing attached to this other weird staff thing, and then I want to have that kind of illustration of like flash foliage or explosive vegetation just like, you know, erupting out of this, and kind of that's the wonderment of the green men, is they're like, whoa, there's no way, how is this possible? So I think I want to actually do that and show what these eggs are, because I think in the hour, like, I came to a cool idea, but I didn't give myself enough time or a way to draw it that was efficient enough. And again, that's part of the process. Like, the 1 hour character design challenge is all about learning and improving, and I think everyone can benefit from it from all levels, you know, of capacity and skill. But yeah, thank you guys for checking this out. Let's look at a couple things I've been working on. So I've been finishing some old designs that I haven't touched in a long time. I'll show you some stuff if the Photoshop wants to open. Let's see. Yeah, so this is a cool piece. This isn't done yet. As you can see, there's still a lot of painting to do. But this is a fun character of like a key warden, like this wandering warden who's got this cool key gun and this big chest. And he like travels around and he'll guard your goods. Like if you want to send something of value somewhere, like you hire one of these guys. And so I've got this whole like world that I've built around it where they're like all from all these different places in the world. Like here's one that would live more in like a desert canyon region. He's got kind of like this sminky weird guy that he's riding on, and he's got a cool hat and stuff. He's also got a key gun, and like this one's riding on monkey, and you know, like just scribbles to remember the idea. And then their secret hideout is this cool bridge to this like giant keep hidden in the mountains that's like a giant key lock system thing. And as you can see, I'm just exploring, but that's a cool idea I'm working on. And then another piece I'm working on that's a cool fish world thing, which always got to show the cool fish world stuff I'm working on, is this piece here, which is a cool frog knight I've been working on. So the frog knight's sick. This is just like a, you know, practicing materials and character and all that stuff. So taking a sketch of something that's a cool idea and actually just resolving it and painting it out is super fun. So that's what I've been doing with this. I think it's just a really strong visual. There's so many cool things. You keep finding frogs in different places. It's like a really cool one. So yeah, the frog knight's sick. And the last thing that I'll talk about, which is relevant, is that I'm going to go through a little bit of I'm doing a class. As you can see, it's not available yet, but I'm doing a class for March. It's going to be a 5-week class. And I just want to go through a little bit of what I'm like wanting to accomplish with this class. So if you're looking to expand your understanding of what your sketches and illustrations and concepts are capable of communicating, this is going to be really great. And if people who feel stuck and your ability to communicate your ideas, then participating in this really, really intense bootcamp course is going to like help you. It's going to, well, here I have it written. It's going to give you the knowledge and skills to create compelling imagery for your personal and professional projects. So this is for artists and designers, and it's to advance your capacity for understanding narrative and its application to visual art specifically, so that you can basically use those skills and create compelling work for anything that you do, whether it's like comics or just concept art, world building, because all of it uses the same fundamentals. So I'm going to be talking about like those visual narrative fundamentals that are going to really level up everything you do. And And so week 1 is going to be all about identifying and designing narrative. So just understanding what is narrative, like static versus active narrative. It's a very interesting concept that I've been working on, and it's going to help you a lot. The relationship between text and image, so specifically relating to comics, illustration, and concept art. When to use text in your concept art, when to use text in your illustration, and in comics, the relationship between text and image. Super complicated, super cool. I love it. And talking about long form versus short form. Week 2 is going to be all about perspective. I realized in my character design bootcamp that perspective is the biggest weak point for people. So week 2 is going to be all about perspective. So I'm going to give you a full breakdown of how to work in perspective and why you need to learn perspective. Like, you need to know it in order to understand this stuff. So that's going to be really fun. You're going to learn about all the classic film shots, why they work, and what role perspective plays in storyboarding, comics, and illustration, which is really cool. And then week 3 is going to be all about action. So, like, what is the body, the figure and how it moves. And again, it's going to be a little bit of an anatomy breakdown, not really, but you're going to know everything you need to know in order to actually compose action, and how to direct your characters, which is super important. Ignore this note. This note is for me. I didn't mean to show this. As you can see, I haven't published this yet, so it still has that note that I have. Anyway, relativity, specificity, and empathy. I'll explain that in greater depth when it comes up. And then week 4 is going to be all about mood, aesthetic, and style. So limitations, make projects possible. Like, why do comics look the way they do? Why does animation look the way it does? And understanding that style is usually a response. It's a kind of a result of the limitations of a medium. So that's super important to learn. Oh my gosh, this is going to change your life, because it changed mine. That's for sure. And this is coming from someone who has like started like 8 comics and all the stuff and everything. Like, I've worked in animation and games and everything. So it's like, this is a really important one to learning about genre and learning the pros and cons of style, which I've talked about in my other courses too. But again, this is a point of view from the visual narrative thing. And then I'll talk about week 5 another time. So this is the class. It's going to be 700 bones to do the full mentorship. So you're going to get a lot of one-on-one time with me. We're going to talk about your assignments. You're going to get a lot of feedback, and you're going to leave a different person through doing the full one. I'm also going to include a spectator tier, because I know a lot of people can't afford the full class and they still want the information. So I'm going to make that available as well. So yeah, man, we're going to do some fun stuff over the next couple of months. I'm really excited about it. Thanks for tuning in today. We got to talk about the 1 hour character design format. If you want to join and do some of these with us, you totally can. The Patreon is only $3 a month, so you can check that out. And sure do love you guys. You guys rule. And thanks for tuning in. I hope you achieve all you wish to achieve in this life and more. This is Gabriel Quinn signing out. You guys rule.